Всем привет! Меня зовут Алексей Иванкин, я из компании 908. Я сейчас работаю в Сан-Франциско в нашем офисе, в нашем калифорнийском офисе, в котором мы запускаем свои проекты в Калифорнии и помогаем нашим партнерам проверять гипотезы, делать MVP и запускать свои проекты тоже в Калифорнии. Я хочу вам представить Джонатана Нэнсина, создателя Hackers&Founders. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. Thanks.
Is it немножко
Говорите.
A little, very little Russian.
That's the wrong, yeah. Okay. What's the goal of Hackers&Founders community and events?
Hackers&Founders started 4 years ago with me and a couple of people in a bar talking about startups. It was actually originally the goal was for my wife. She said, "Honey, I love you, but you're spending way too many nights at home coding and not enough time talking with other people who are trying to start startups."
It was Laura.
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 She said, "I love you. Get out of the house at least one night a month." So I did. I started a group called Hackers&Founders on meetup.com, and first night it was 4 guys and me, and then it was 8, 16, 24, and now we have 6,700 members here in Silicon Valley. And we've recently decided to work on it full-time as our startup. And so our goal is to actually help develop grassroots startup communities and make life suck less for entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley and also around the globe. We've taken kind of an open source approach to our brand, and we want to try and help bring a lot of the resources that we have here in Silicon Valley to other communities around the globe. We want to try to educate founders so that they, instead of building a little widget, they build a product, and then instead of a product, they can turn that into a startup, and then from that startup, hopefully they can have an exit or build a great thriving company, but then they can actually continue to become serial entrepreneurs. And that's really what we try to do at Hackers&Founders.
Okay, great. For you, what's definition of good event or bad event? For example, when you organize some event in San Francisco or San Jose or in Valley.
So for us, what we really try to focus on with our events is we try to get people who are hackers who want to become founders. And we also have founders who want to become hackers. And we try to get these people in a room together. And it's pretty amazing when that happens on a regular basis. It's pretty amazing the connections that actually happen. And the relationships that are actually formed. I picked up a copy of Business Week last year, and I was looking through it, and it was Business Week's top 20 entrepreneurs under 30. And I'm reading the article, I'm like, oh, or there's Rich. Oh, there's Mike. Oh, there's, Joe. I knew 5 out of Business Week's top 20 entrepreneurs. Why? Because in the technology and the startup industry, things can change very quickly and a company can take off. And when you get together with people on a regular basis who are really working on these things, those connections that happen end up being extremely powerful over the long term.
So for you, it's not a problem that one entrepreneurs going to Hackers&Founders. It's not a problem, but he must change his speech, his vision.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I actually just quit my full-time job a month and a half ago, and even though I've been programming since I was 7, I went back to school online to study engineering, but my day job has been working as a nurse in emergency rooms 5 miles away from here. I've worked as an emergency room trauma and critical care nurse for almost 20 years. I just quit that 6 weeks ago so I could work full-time on Hackers and Founders. My last technology startup that I was working on was a search engine for financial news coming out of developing countries. And I had an alpha of the search built, I had the crawlers built, I have the indexers built, I had all of that built, but when Hackers and Founders reaches, 20,000 members worldwide, what do you do? So for me, it's not a problem. What I notice is that people grow and develop, or they just stop coming.
Okay, in Ukraine, our event have partners. It's TA Ventures, Venture Fund, and Wannabes, it's incubator. What are you thinking about cooperation with ventures and incubators?
I think it's fine. My vision or my dream is that we just have a lot more startup ecosystems form around the globe. And I want to hear from the people who are organizing these communities around the globe, and I want to hear what their problems are, because in my mind, if I'm going to work on Hackers and Founders full time, the project needs to be interesting enough so that I'm not hacking on a search engine. So trying to hack a global startup economy, that's an interesting problem, and that's interesting enough to actually work on. So in my mind, whatever you think is the best for your community, do it. If you have problems, tell me. That's my vision.
What do you know about Hackers and Founders outside the United States? Europe, Eastern Europe?
I think Hackers and Founders Ukraine. You guys have, what, 3 communities now? Maybe 4? You said you were going to go into Odessa as well. Some of the communities that have started haven't taken the whole Hackers and Founders name, like Hackers and Founders Copenhagen is Hackers and Founders and Designers Copenhagen. There's Hackers and Founders Amsterdam. There's Paris Hackers, which is another group. There's the Hacker News meetup in London, which has almost a couple thousand members, I think. There's Yaro has a group in Lithuania. He organizes pretty frequent bar camps, but he and I stay in touch. He has about 800 members. In Mexico, there have actually been 3 Hackers and Founders chapters that have started in the last 6 months. Santiago, Chile, 2 chapters have started in the last 8 months. And really, this idea that hackers can actually create a product in a startup is going viral globally, which I think is really interesting.
For you, what's the main participant of event, hacker or founder?
So we try to keep our groups hacker friendly, because the founders or the people on the business side will come. And my opinion is that if you're going to start a technology startup, even the business people need to at least not be afraid of like hardcore engineers. You really do need that, because it's the engineers that do the inventing that is part of the startups.
So primary is idea.
It's
solution.
It's execution on the idea.
Execution.
On the idea. So I tend to focus on building events that are good for engineers and hackers to come to, and business people end up showing up, but we usually try to have like 60 to 70% hackers, 20 to 30% business, 5 to 10% design. That's usually a pretty good mix for us.
What do you think about incubators? I hear that it's not always a good idea, because your products and your idea place it in a very comfort atmosphere, and no hardcore, no money problem, no Is it always good for new business, for new team? So, for example, I don't think that team building is a good idea. I think a good product is a good idea to build team.
Yes.
And what do you think about incubators?
So, what I've noticed is that, at least here in Silicon Valley, the problem is that our events, for instance, tend to be kind of a port of entry for people moving to Silicon Valley. And those people might actually have like a really good startup, and they might be in need of startup capital, and they need connections, and they need a little bit of help here or there. But a lot of the times those companies can be pretty self-sufficient. But once someone moves here, it takes them maybe 3 to 4 years to get enough connections, like social business connections, to be able to really plug in to like the investor community. After a startup can connect with that investor community, then they can leverage that investor's business connections. And so what I think has happened is that process has become so inefficient. If it takes, it took 3 years of my doing Hackers and Founders events before I met a single investor, or someone that I knew was an investor. And so what I think happened is that incubators came in, they said, we can help you make this process more efficient, but we'll charge 6 to 10% equity, we'll give you a tiny little bit of money, and we'll help do that. So in my view, the incubation process is an inefficiency in the startup economy. It's the fact that hackers, when they're actually building products, and it's a certain category of products that is going to go the venture route as opposed to someone who pursues purely like like originally GitHub was bootstrapped and profitable and they could have continued doing that. They just took $100 million because they wanted to do something that potentially had exponential growth. If you want to go that funding route, and that is only one choice, but if you want to go that funding route, incubators, I think, ideally would make that process a lot more efficient. There's really only a handful of incubators that I think statistically are showing positive returns financially for themselves. And I think they're needed. I think that they make the market more efficient as a global ecosystem, but at the same time, giving everybody $50,000 or $100,000, is that a good idea? I don't know. In my mind, that investment is into the education of the entrepreneur, not necessarily in the company. And so, if those incubators let people think about product, that founder, hopefully they're going to, if that startup fails, hopefully they'll go and start another one. And if that one fails, hopefully they'll start a third one. If the success ratio is 1 to 10, one startup out of every 10 succeeds, I think that you have to start 10 startups.
Yes, it's a good idea. So, current Hackers and Founders moving to become an incubator.
So we're starting, I guess you're going to call it an incubation process. But my frustration is that the startup ecosystem is just very inefficient. So what I want to do is have an application every 8 weeks when people apply. It's a simple application. They get feedback and they get score from entrepreneurs. The top scoring startups out of that process automatically get introductions to VCs and investors. And then, based on the recommendations of those VCs and investors, then we invite those companies into our incubator for 13 weeks, we polish the pitch, give them free legal, free introductions, free hosting, free, as much possible as we can for free, and then really try to build them into a very tight community of founders so that they can help each other out. And then push them out to AngelList. We produce video pitches of each company. And then at the end of the process, we'll have a cocktail party for investors and the startups to come. And so for that process, we charge 2%. Is that an incubator? Yeah, it's the easiest way to actually explain it, but that's what we're doing.
I hope your plans will be will work. So, what you want to say to Hackers and Founders Odessa? Привет, Odessa.
Привет, Odessa. I love what you guys are doing. I actually think that Silicon Valley has a lot of weaknesses that other hacker communities around the globe can actually exploit. A lot of times our vision here is very centered around the problems that we have and that our people face here. And there's a lot of problems that people are going to see in countries like the Ukraine, and countries like Chile, and countries like Mexico that can be huge problems that you guys can solve and then take to other markets around the world.
Ukrainians don't like Chile. So one is better.
But I think that, for instance, people in the Ukraine could develop technology that could be used all over Russia or Belarus or, all over Europe. And those aren't problems that I see here. And I think that's a huge competitive advantage. And so I would suggest that other Hackers and Founders chapters around the world kick Silicon Valley's ass.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for your Hackers and Founders, and thank you for your work to build ecosystem. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you.
I hope.
До свидания.
Да.